Trump just purged his military brass of far left and woke ideologies that has been limiting the American armed forces for decades now. And with the help of Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, they will revitalize the US Army, Navy, Air Force, and Space Forces with brand new standards, new rules of engagement, and much, much more. But these changes will put Canada's ideology surrounding the Army completely against the US. In this video, we're going to go through the major changes, how it affects the Trump administration, and Pierre Poilievre's promise to do the same thing. Oh yes, he made a promise. Because as always, I'll show you exactly what just happened, and I always give you the news that actually matters.
With physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a four-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the joint force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. Also today, at my direction, every warrior across our joint force is required to do PT every duty day. Should be common sense. I mean, most units do that already.
Common sense. The two most powerful and unused words in our modern day life. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth begins his speech by talking about new standards that every member of the armed forces, regardless of rank, to abide by. These standards are meant for normal Army cadets, but also have to go all the way up to multi-star ranking generals. Now let's look at the next announcement.
This, and I want to be very clear about this is not about preventing women from serving. We very much value the impact of female troops. Our female officers and NCOs are the absolute best in the world. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it. That is not the intent, but it could be the result, so be it. It will also mean that weak men won't qualify because we're not playing games. This is combat. This is life or death. As we all know, this is you versus an enemy hell-bent on killing you. To be an effective, lethal fighting force, you must trust that the warrior alongside you in battle is capable, truly physically capable of doing what is necessary under fire. You know this is the only standard you would want for your kids and for your grandkids. Apply the War Department Golden Rule, the 1990 test, and the E6 test, and it's really hard to go wrong.
Again, more common sense. Army standards are never meant to be relaxed regardless of who's trying to join. A lot of people are saying that this is sexist, but are forgetting that the Army isn't an institution that just parades around, but rather the Army is a fighting force that is built to protect your way of life. This common sense standard is the bare minimum standard that human fighting forces have been abiding by since the dawn of time and war. Because ultimately, Hegseth's announcement is the beginning of the end of wokeism in the military. Let's take a look.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit.
The removal of limiting ideologies will allow the American armed forces to become an even more effective fighting machine, especially as their culture moves from inclusivity to a more warrior-focused culture. But now, what I want you to really pay attention to is just how quiet the generals are in the audience. Because what a lot of people don't know and don't realize is that Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth are not popular or liked by the military brass and military elites in Washington, because that said elites would rather status quo over revitalization. But the Army cadets and normal soldiers, on the other hand, who, by the way, are the next generation of generals, have chosen to react like this to Hegseth's comment. Let's take a look.
We're not a college or a university. We're not interested in your woke garbage and your political correctness.
The cheers and applause you hear is the sound of the next generation of warriors who are hungry for a true warrior culture. And the Trump administration is here to deliver just that. But this announcement is not free from controversy, because Trump slipped in this comment just after Hegseth's announcement. Let's take a look.
I'm thrilled to be here this morning to address the senior leadership of what is once again known around the world as the Department of War. Together with many of you in the room, we've brought back the fundamental principle that defending the homeland is the military's first and most important priority. That's what it is. Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly. After spending trillions of dollars defending the borders of foreign countries, with your help, we're defending the borders of our country from now on.
President Trump announces that he wishes to use the army for more inner city crime control, much like when he brought the forces in Washington City. Now, even though this might actually be effective, the optics don't necessarily look too good. Because if you have to bring the army to quell crime, then that means a huge mistake was made some time ago. Because this very point was echoed by retired military leaders like this one. Let's take a look.
Security. What is the first step in making the country strong again?
Well, that's a very good question. And it's a question that a lot of us have been thinking about for a while now. I talk to people every day, and so many people are they're sort of beside themselves with what is going on in our country. And when you ask me, what's the first step to making it better? I think it's having people be informed and standing up and saying enough is enough. We have to do that. Everyday people have to do that. And I talk to Trump voters. I talk to people who are on both sides of the aisle here in Kentucky. And when it comes to the use of our military, there's this feeling of like, this isn't something they voted for. This isn't something that they wanted done. And that's true for a lot of policies that he's pushing down, but particularly with the military, we have this sense of we don't really want our troops in the streets of America. We don't want this federal massed force in the streets of America, throwing people to the ground like we're some third world country. I mean, people do get that, whether you are wearing a red jersey or a blue jersey. We want to tackle crime, but this isn't the way to do it, and people get that. So I think the first step is just standing up and having folks in the military, not currently in, but retired, saying, hey, this isn't America. This isn't what we should be using our military for.
If you paid attention to mainstream news interviews with former Army leaders, you'll actually notice that all the critics to Trump and Hegseth's recent standard changes and announcements are not talking about those standard changes. Or even, quite frankly, they're not even complaining about the removal of woke ideologies. But rather, the military leaders who are critiquing Trump and Hegseth are saying that Trump is using the army to crime. Now, all of that aside, we are in Canada. So why should we care about this? Well, because Canada has an armed forces that boasts a long and proud history of accomplishments, victories, and quite frankly, greatness. But recently, and as a result of the last liberal decade, decade, the Canadian Armed Forces under ideological leadership have begun to present themselves like this. Let's take a look. Out of sync, out of standard, and a perfect representation of what happens when you mix liberal ideology and the army. And if you think this is the worst representation of how wokeism has gripped our army, let me show you what's actually insane. And then I'm going to give you a lot of hope by showing you Pierre's promise, as well as Pierre's plan of action. So wokeism has been gripping the Canadian Armed Forces for a long time now, especially since back in 2024 January, so over a year and a half ago, there was literally a feminist intersectional trauma-informed standard that was given to the Canadian Armed Forces under the Trudeau Liberal government. And when we click on this article, you'll see literally the subtitle for this thing, or I should say rather the subtext. The official position of the Canadian Armed Forces is that they and the country they serve are irredeemably racist and oppressive. This is from the National Post, which, to be fair and honest, it is more center-right. But with what I'm about to show you after this, you're going to notice that this is not even that far off from the truth of how they are trying to indoctrinate the armed forces. Because this next article, it shocked me when I discovered it. Maybe it won't shock you, but so the Department of National Defense for Canada, again, it's for Canada, paid $32,000 for intersectional feminist report on space exploration, which calls for feminist, anti-racist approaches to space exploration. That's right, they take your tax dollars and do these really weird things that have nothing in relation to each other. Who knew space exploration had gender and oppression? Now, we all know that wokeism has gripped this country, and unfortunately, it's been a lot of negativity in the news. But I want to give you hope, I want to give you positivity, because Pierre Poilievre did promise to end woke culture in a way that Pete Hegseth and Trump have done in the past, or shall I say have done quite recently. And aptly enough, the Conservative leader says the social experiments of the Trudeau Liberals have no place in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, we've seen the Carney administration promise to give a lot of funds to the Canadian Armed Forces to boost the budget. But the biggest issue for the Canadian Armed Forces is not budget, as you've seen in the clip of the out-of-sync parade marchers. The biggest issue is the lack of a warrior culture that is prevalent in the entire armed forces, not only the special forces, because as you know, Canadian Special Forces are world-renowned for their accomplishments, their skill set, and even their culture. But the general Canadian Armed Forces, unfortunately, has not been maintaining said culture due to a bunch of liberal ideologues running everything. So Pierre Poilievre isn't just promising to spend more money on Canada's military, he's promising to change the culture as a whole. I'm going to link this article and feel free to watch this 3-minute clip. It actually leaves a lot of information as to how Pierre is going to change the culture. But long story short, it's going to be quite similar to what Pete Hegseth did. And I can almost guarantee it's going to bring a lot more effectiveness to Canada and Canada's culture as a whole. Now, all that being said, what do you think? Do you think that Canada's culture for the army needs revitalization? Do you think Trump and Hegseth are going a little too far? And do you think Pierre will actually be able to make all these changes and updates? And do not forget to like, subscribe, and comment, because I will see you on the next one.